A girl, once and beautiful, ended up in a grave with a huge sickle across her neck. There were no signs of violence, no indications of any actual crime. Yet, someone was clearly terrified when they forced her into that grave. So scared that they even placed a padlock on the big toe of her left foot. They wanted her to stay in the tomb once and for all, fearing she might rise and take revenge on them. So, a whole community turned against a young lady who wasn't even over 20 years old, deeming her to be of ultimate danger. Do you see what I'm driving at? Let's test your historical knowledge. Who has been feared throughout human history to such an extent that commoners couldn't shake off that lingering sense of dread, even after their passing? If you say witches, warlocks, and vampires, you'd be completely correct. Just a little hint here. If you can't overpower someone physically, you can do it supernaturally. Well, that's at least what people used to think back in the 17th century. Not only was there a sickle and a padlock, but there were also signs of an attempt to twist the girl's corpse in the grave and turn it face down. This attempt had failed, leaving her spine buckled and twisted. By the way, the padlock wasn't necessarily meant to lock a vampire. It was more likely a talisman against evil spirits. That's a peculiar and, let's face it, very cruel way to bury someone. Yet it was a common practice for creating anti-vampire burial sites. The methods for preventing vampires from rising were quite elaborate. First off, let me introduce a term. Anti-vampire graves, known as revenant graves, date back thousands of years and have been found in various locations across Europe. Europe, you heard that right. Now before you say, hey, vampires are a Romanian thing, Dracula, duh, let me convince you otherwise. They are a part of all European folklore, meaning you can find references to them throughout Europe. With new settlements in America, vampire lore spread there too, eventually turning into the Twilight Saga. These anti-vampire burials are characterized by evidence of precautions taken to prevent those who bit the dust from rising. Such measures could include placing large stones on the deceased's legs or even piercing the body with a lance to fix it to the ground. To be completely safe, they could also consider removing the head from the torso. So, burying the body face down, cutting off the head, and pressing the body with a stone were the methods used to keep someone believed to be a demonic being from leaving the grave. Let's return to the poor lady, or rather, the girl. A couple of archaeologists, Dariusz Poliński and his partner, Magna Durodska, who happened to be partners in both crime and life, stumbled upon her grave. Strangely, all of her 206 bones remained untouched. Yet no gravestone, no name, nothing. Just a lonely grave on a hill in northern Poland. Poliński, a professor of archaeology, and Zagrodska began piecing together the story of the woman they eventually named Zosia. Carbon dating suggested she had been about 18 years old and had passed away about 350 years ago during a chaotic time in Poland's history. There is little documentation about this graveyard, which seemed to serve as a resting place for individuals marginalized by the community. Was Zosia a poor girl who had been marginalized because life forced her into the worst situation a lady could face? Not really. As the archaeologists delved deeper, they stumbled upon some hints that indicated she might have hailed from a rich family. Her burial featured a stylish bonnet, and the delicate silk along with shiny silver and gold threads found with it suggested that it was part of an elegant headdress. This all pointed to the idea that she had some serious status or wealth. But the way she was buried indicated her outsider status in the village of Pien. Perhaps her presence there was unwanted, hence the idea of her being a vampire, backed up by the manner in which she was forced into the grave and held there. By analyzing the structure of her skull and extricating DNA from her skeleton, scientists created a reconstruction of what her face might have looked like. The specialists meticulously reshaped Zosia's likeness using modeling clay on a 3D printed model of her skull, which proved to be a deeply moving experience. They remarked that while they often worked on face reconstructions, in this case, they also sought to restore her dignity. Utilizing these three methods, the team reconstructed Zosia's 400-year-old face, revealing the human story buried beneath supernatural beliefs. It's ironic, isn't it? First, people tried their hardest to make the world forget her face and prevent her from ever coming back. 400 years later, people did everything they could to bring her back to life. Her picture now is all over the internet, yet we will never see the faces of those who buried her. Alas, this reconstruction project only allows viewers to visually connect with Zosha, but her true story remains a mystery. But what we know for sure is that people who were deemed vampires were badly discriminated against, to say the least. Rumor had it that hungry vampires would even steal people to quench their thirst. Let's use math to prove this rumor wrong and prove that Zosha wasn't one of them. Back in the year 1600, there were only 537 million people worldwide. Yeah, this data may not be very accurate, but it's pretty close to reality. A physicist, Kostas Eftimiou, calculated that if a vampire had been drinking one person's blood each month, humanity would have faced extinction within a few years. Starting with one vampire and a population of 537 million in 1600, this math shows we'd have no humans left by July 1602. But here we are now. Well, while placing a stone on a corpse to make sure the vampire doesn't rise may be something new to you, there are also a bunch of stereotypical things associated with these creatures that you definitely know, such as garlic and mirrors. Funnily enough, even though it's all based on a bunch of superstitions, there's pretty good logic behind the garlic thing. You see, it contains a special compound called allicin, which is a powerful antibiotic. While people back then couldn't know what an antibiotic was, they noticed garlic was pretty effective against various conditions. Since they believed vampires were created by a particular blood condition, they also believed garlic could defeat a vampire. And there's more. There's actually a blood condition called porphyria, which makes people look like real vampires. Their skin is pale and their teeth get bigger as their gums shrink. And guess what? People who have porphyria cannot consume garlic, as it worsens their condition. Wow, that's a cool coincidence. The next superstition is a bit fresher, and it's about vampires avoiding mirrors. The first known reference to the mirrors comes from the book Dracula in 1897. But why wouldn't a vampire show a reflection? Simple. Before the plastic era we live in, mirrors were traditionally backed with silver. Silver was commonly believed to repel evil spirits, possibly because it has antimicrobial properties. Much like garlic, its healing properties may be what was supposed to scare off a vampire. Another reason why suspected vampires may have avoided mirrors is the changes to their appearance from conditions commonly confused with vampirism, like porphyria and rabies. People afflicted with these conditions may have avoided looking in mirrors for that reason, causing others to assume that vampires avoided mirrors. But if you ever met a vampire and these methods don't repel it, I have one more trick for you. Ask the potential vampire to count. It can be spilled grains, seeds, or even the holes in the fishing net if you happen to have one. Vampires are into math, so they'll stop to count, delaying them until sunrise. And we all know that vampires don't do well in sunlight. Ironically, it's Count Von Count, a vampire who teaches us how to count on Sesame Street. In 1975 in Puerto Rico, a farmer saw most of his goats lying lifeless on the ground. He got closer and saw that the animals were stiff and had 2 puncture marks on their necks. Goats were not the only animals that were hurt. Many pigs, cows, and geese lost their lives too. They all had the same distinctive bite marks on their necks, and all had been drained of their vital fluids. The locals immediately jumped to conclusions and blamed dogs, and the authorities didn't bother to do a better investigation and just said dogs had done it without looking for any proof. A couple of days later, though, many more animals were found deceased. Among them was a cow that had literally been opened, and it had a lot of scratches on its head. The farmer next door reported that his chickens had been destroyed by something. In just a few weeks, the creature took the lives of 90 farm animals. After some time, another farmer said that 10 of his goats had been drained, 7 had been hurt, and 11 were missing. This time, the authorities didn't waste any time and started the monster hunt, but they had no luck finding the culprit. The incident was all over the local newspaper, and the beast was named the Vampire of Maca. The incident caught the attention of the Agricultural Commission, and scientist Juan Rivera was tasked to solve this otherworldly mystery. His first suspect was a Puerto Rican boa. This non-venomous snake can grow to be a little over 6 feet. Still, its diet consists of only small prey. It's also very shy of humans and other animals. It avoids bigger creatures at all costs. You're more likely to see fish climbing trees than this boa taking down a whole cow. Near the crime scene, a large cave was discovered, and we all know that weird creatures like living in dark, cold caves. In the cave, they found some crazy-looking bats. As we've seen in movies, bats can turn into vampires, so they must be the culprit. But no, bats were as innocent as they could be. Their favorite food wasn't cows or goats, it was figs. They were peaceful fruit-eating bats that didn't care about animals. Again, the researcher hit a wall. Suddenly, all the terror stopped in July 1975. It seemed like the creature had vanished into thin air, but not for long. 2 decades later, 62 miles from the previous site, more animals were found. A local vet examined them. He was terrified to discover that every animal had 2 precisely cut holes like he had never seen before. The animals were anemic and looked like they'd passed away recently. By the looks of it, the creature's favorite food was goats, and that's how it got the infamous name we all heard of, chupacabra, which means the goat sucker. Dogs, chickens, rabbits, and other animals were not off the menu. In short time, the chupacabra took 1,000 farm animals. Now, this animal had a name, but people still had zero idea about what the chupacabra looked like, which was terrifying. In Canovanas, Madeline and her mother reported seeing a weird creature that could have been the chupacabra. They said it had been walking on 2 legs like a human and resembled a kangaroo. They mentioned that the monster also had spikes on the back, no ears, large dark eyes, and 2 holes for a nose. It had 2 arms with 3 fingers. The chupacabra seemed to like Madeline's house because her husband and his coworker found it in the garage. They tried to capture it, but didn't succeed. Madeline later drew a detailed sketch of it. Many people saw the sketch and reported seeing a similar creature. They claimed it had strong legs and wings and smelled like sulfur. Take all these descriptions with a grain of salt. If they'd been true, they would have been all over the news. But still, keep in mind these descriptions. They will be important later in the story. In 1976, on some talk show, they talked about the chupacabra, and the show quickly went viral. Soon, people started reporting having seen a similar creature in Florida and Mexico. Many said that the stories were like a unicorn rodeo. They were totally made up. In Mexico, 2 skeptical inquiries, Patricia and Mario, laid traps around those farms where the chupacabra had allegedly been seen. They caught some animals in their traps, but no sign of the goat sucker. They only captured wild dogs. The police stated that the chupacabra was just a wild dog, not a mythical creature. And still, in the next 5 years, there were numerous sightings of the chupacabra worldwide. On the 13th of August of the year 2000, a farmer from Nicaragua found 25 of his sheep and 35 of his neighbor's sheep hurt. So he decided to take the matter into his own hands. One night, he was patiently waiting in the pitch-black night for the creature to appear. Suddenly, from the corner of his eye, he saw something and managed to hit it. The creature passed away. Finally, they had proof that the chupacabra was not just a fairy tale. It was a big thing. Later, the chupacabra was examined by a vet. The vet was shocked because he had no idea what the creature was. Remember Madeline's description? Well, the vet described the animal differently, but his story turned out to be more plausible. This chupacabra had large teeth, giant claws, greenish eyes, bat-like skin, and a crest sticking out of its back. The vet concluded that the animal was some kind of hybrid. They thought it was a cross between a wolf and a crocodile, but it sounds like an exaggeration and is hard to believe. We all know that such a mix is impossible. They did some tests on the body at the university in Nicaragua, and the results didn't quite deliver what they had expected. The animal was a wild dog with mange. Mange is an itchy skin disease that causes dogs to lose their hair. It's also highly contagious. When a dog has mange, their skin becomes scaly and wrinkled. When they returned the body, the farmer noticed it wasn't his chupacabra. 7 years later, another body was found in Texas. Phyllis Cannon returned to her farm and noticed that some of her chickens had passed away. All seemed to be anemic. Later, she saw coyote-looking creatures that didn't have any hair. More of her animals were harmed, so she had to set up cameras on her farm. But unfortunately, like always, she didn't manage to record anything. Surprisingly, she got a call from a local farmer who had found the chupacabra hit by a car. Later, another body was found much closer to her farm. She took some pictures of the animal, and soon, those images were all over the internet. Phyllis was curious and sent 5 DNA samples to 5 different universities. The results didn't match any animal in the archives. Researchers had no idea what it was, but it wasn't a dog. Phyllis still has one animal in her freezer and a taxidermied specimen in her house. There are many theories about the chupacabra. Some claim that the animal is a genetically modified monkey that escaped the lab. Others state that it's some mysterious, otherworldly creature. The most consistent hypothesis is that the chupacabra is a mix between a Mexican wolf and a coyote with mange. Now, do you remember that Phyllis said that she had sent samples to 5 universities and no match had been found? Well, it turned out she hadn't been telling the truth. At one university, they found that the animal was a mix between a coyote and a Mexican wolf and that it had mange. Animals with mange are weak and will likely try to hunt farm animals to survive. People, when they see something they don't know, tend to exaggerate, which is why all witnesses describe the animal differently.
In the late 17th and early 18th centuries, Europe was infested by vampires. The situation got so wild that authorities stepped in, and even military officers investigated these creepy cases. And their conclusion was clear. Yep, vampires are definitely real. Now, we're talking about a long time before Dracula showed up in books and movies. Back then, people genuinely believed those who had passed could rise and drain the living of their blood. Tragically, their victims would not survive the encounter. But vampires didn't stay at rest. Instead, they continued walking, interacting among the living and infesting villages. These beliefs spread rapidly, causing panic across regions. It all kicked off in Eastern Europe, specifically Serbia. Villagers started panicking after mysterious passings occurred one after another. Take the story of Petar Bleggoyovich, a Serbian peasant who passed in 1725. Shortly after his burial, villagers claimed that Petar returned, knocking on doors and asking for shoes or food. Sounds harmless, right? Well, not really. Within days, those villagers began mysteriously passing away too. 9 people perished in total. Everyone freaked out, insisting Petar was responsible, as if he managed somehow to come back from the grave at night to feast on the living. Eventually, authorities dug up Petar's body to see what was going on. They wanted to check if there were any signs that he was still alive. So they looked closely at his hair, beard, and nails to see if they had grown. And they actually had. In fact, there was no sign of decomposition at all. His body looked fresh. Then they found something even weirder. There was some blood around his mouth. And that was enough for people to say, see, he's definitely a vampire. Then came Arnold Polioli, arguably the most infamous vampire of them all. He was a soldier who lost his life after falling off a hay wagon and breaking his neck. But there was something strange about it. Before that tragic event, Polioli claimed he had been bitten by a vampire once. Luckily, he said he cured himself by eating soil from the vampire's grave and smearing himself with its blood. Sorry, not exactly dinner table talk, eh? But hey, if he was cured, no one had anything to worry about after he was gone, right? Well, not exactly. Within a month after Paoli was buried, 4 people said they were being tormented by him. And not long after that, they were gone too. 10 days after Paoli was buried, the villagers dug him up, just to be sure everything was, well, normal. And this is where things got eerie. His body hadn't decomposed. His hair, nails, and beard had all grown longer, and fresh blood was dripping from his mouth. Remind you of someone? Yep, our guy Petar. But in Paoli's case, it was more disturbing. The blood wasn't just coming from his mouth. It was pouring from his eyes, nose, and ears. His shirt, his coffin, everything was completely soaked in red. Now terrified, the villagers drove a stake through his heart and burned his body. Oh, and they also dug up the 4 people they believe he had targeted just to be safe. They went through the same process with them just to make sure none of them would return as vampires. Hey, who knows? But their vampire nightmare didn't stop there. A few years later, in the winter of 1731, a new epidemic occurred. 13 people passed within several weeks. Eventually, even local authorities stepped in, sending official investigators to calm things down. Their reports, incredibly, concluded that the vampire attacks were real, at least according to witnesses. That official validation changed everything. It kicked off a wave of vampire hysteria all across Europe. But why was everyone so quick to believe those who had passed away were coming back? One big reason was how little people understood health problems at the time. Bodies that appeared fresh or swollen after burial, blood around mouths, or even fingernails and hair seemingly growing, these natural post-mortem changes were mistaken for supernatural signs. Another thing villagers misunderstood was decomposition itself. Natural gases cause bodies to bloat, making them look as if they had recently been active. This terrifying image reinforced local beliefs that these people weren't at rest, but instead returning to cause harm. Plus, under certain circumstances, the decomposition process can be delayed for a long time. One reason this can happen is because of something called saponification. This is a natural process that happens when a body is buried in a cold and damp place, exactly like in some parts of Eastern Europe. In this kind of environment, the fat in the body can turn into a waxy soap-like substance. This wax covers the body and helps stop it from rotting. Okay, but how to explain the nails and hair growing? It's more like an optical illusion, not real growth. Now what happens is that the skin dries out and pulls back a little. When the skin shrinks like that, it makes things like stubble on the chin or fingernails look longer than they were before. But that's not the case. And what about the blood? Well, it turns out science has an explanation for that too. How long blood stays liquid after someone passes depends a lot on the surrounding temperature. In colder places, it can stay fluid for days. So if a body was dug up, there's a good chance they'd still find liquid blood in the veins. It might have looked strange, even scary, but it was just the cold doing its thing and slowing everything down. Medical researchers today believe that many so-called vampire symptoms match up with conditions like rabies. Back then, most people in these communities kept animals around, and villages were usually near forests full of wildlife. And there's still no truly effective cure for rabies. This condition can cause things like insomnia, aggression, biting, and even a fear of water, which lines up closely with the way vampires were described. So it turns out all these supposed supernatural events had logical explanations. Today, we might make fun or roll our eyes at the idea of real vampires roaming around Eastern Europe. But back then, those fears were taken very seriously. Whole communities were thrown into panic. There are plenty of documented cases where families dug up their loved ones and removed their hearts, all because they believed the person was a vampire behind the strange things happening to the rest of the family. And newspapers across the continent picked up these stories, spreading the fear far beyond where it all started. What's wild is that stories about blood-sucking creatures didn't just show up in Europe. Similar myths popped up across different continents and time periods. In the Philippines, for example, there is the manananggal, a flying creature that splits in half. In Chile, they've got the peyote, a shape-shifting being that drains blood. And in Australia, some indigenous tribes told stories of the Yaramayahu, a little red creature that drops out of trees and drinks your blood with suckers on the ends of its hands and feet. How cute. Well, back in Europe, the hysteria faded by the late 18th century, thanks to growing medical knowledge. But as you know, the legend never really went away. It just shifted into literature and gave rise to famous characters like Dracula. The author, Bram Stoker, was inspired by stories that had been going around since the 1700s. But he turned them into romanticized fictional monsters. You know, sharp teeth, pale skin, black clothes, that whole thing. And that was different from what the villagers believed they were dealing with. And, in a way, those frightened villagers weren't completely wrong. Something was draining those people's lives. But it wasn't vampires. It was just misinformation mixed with a whole lot of imagination running wild. So, next time you see a vampire movie or read a scary story, remember that behind the fiction lies a fascinating truth. A real wave of fear, confusion, and panic that swept Europe nearly 300 years ago, leaving a chilling legacy that still fascinates us today.
In the middle of a dense, foggy forest, you spot glowing red eyes. Suddenly, a strange clicking sound breaks the silence. It's not just in your head. Stretching over 2,000 miles from Newfoundland to central Alabama, the Appalachian Mountains hide terrifying creatures, like Bigfoot and the Wampus Cat. You might think they're just myths, but there's actually a chilling explanation behind them. First up, the Moth Man. This creature is a superstar in the world of horror stories, but not many people know that its legend actually started in the heart of Appalachia, in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Back in 1966, two couples were driving when they suddenly came across a human-sized moth, about 7 feet tall, with glowing red eyes. They totally freaked out and sped up, but the strange creature flew and chased after the car, making a screeching sound until it finally disappeared. After this encounter, the group told the police that the creature looked like a tall, muscular man with huge, white wings, but they couldn't see its face because of the hypnotic effect of its eyes. Since then, the Mothman has become a famous urban legend. People swear they've seen similar creatures in other parts of the US, like Chicago and Gallipolis, Ohio. Theories about what people saw range from a balloon with a flashlight tied to it to extraterrestrial beings visiting Earth. But it's also possible that it was just a bird, more specifically, a barred owl. People probably mistook a bird for this creature because the barred owl looks eerie in the dark. It has spooky eyes and makes creepy clicking sounds. Still, these birds aren't huge, so it's strange how they've been mistaken for such a scary monster. Wait, what did people actually see then? The second strange beings are known as the Mooneyed People. This was a group of bearded, flat-faced, pale people with big blue eyes who supposedly lived all across Appalachia. Why did I say supposedly? Well, because no one could ever prove they actually existed. The stories about them were part of the Cherokee folklore, so we don't really know how reliable the information is. Still, their legends creeped out both locals and visitors in Appalachia. The Mooneyed People were said to come near a house at night, and people inside would hear them talking. But they were warned not to go outside, and no matter what happened, they couldn't watch them. In the morning, they'd find their corn gathered as if someone had helped them. Or the opposite, fields completely cleared like a whole group of men had been working there and taken all the crops. One of the most famous stories about them involves a mysterious stone wall found at Fort Mountain State Park. It was built between the years 500 and 1500, but no one knows who actually built it. Some people believe it was the Mooneyed People's work, and the ruins today are proof they really existed. They might not be delusional, though. One theory suggests that the Mooneyed People were actually Welsh people. At the time, they were in Appalachia, mining the mountains, and the Cherokee gave them this nickname because they lived underground and had great night vision. Hey kitty kitty, come here. Oh wait, what's that? According to legends, the Wampus cat is a half-dog, half-cat creature that roams the Appalachians after dark, or just before dawn. And it can run totally upright on 2 legs. So if it comes running after you like a human would, you'd better hide fast and don't look at it. Rumor has it that its yellow eyes can pierce the hearts and souls of anyone unlucky enough to cross its path, driving them to the edge of madness. Okay, that's probably just folklore, but the real-life creature that might be hiding behind these legends isn't much friendlier. The stories describe the Wampus cat as a kind of underwater panther, so some experts believe it sounds a lot like a mountain lion. Apparently, they're really strong swimmers and cross a large lake without much difficulty. Now, let's say you're driving in the Appalachian region at night. Suddenly, you spot an animal in the middle of the road. You slow down and take a closer look. It looks like a deer, but there's something off. Its eyes are too close together, its head is misshapen, its neck is too long, and its legs move in unnatural ways, almost like a puppet on strings. Oh, and even if you honk, this creature won't move. It's definitely not afraid of you. This is the not deer. Although some people have reported sightings as far away as Texas and even Norway, it's definitely an Appalachian myth. One young woman said she was hiking when she spotted a doe. Suddenly, the animal looked right at her, and she noticed that all of its knees were bent backwards. Any direction a deer's knee is supposed to go, the deer's knees did not. Oh my. Anyway, the internet is flooded with people talking about the not deer and its creepy behavior. But the thing is, we can't find a single photo or video that proves it actually exists. So what could it be? One explanation points to sick animals. There's a neurological condition known as CWD that affects different deer species like elk, moose, and even reindeer. It causes the brains of infected animals to degenerate, leading to loss of body functions and abnormal behavior. Since the symptoms match what some people describe as not deer behavior, it makes sense to think this condition could be behind the strange sightings. The last creature on our list, the one and only Bigfoot. You know, that large, hairy, human-like creature that walks upright and roams the dense forest in the US. In the Appalachian Mountains, there have been Bigfoot sightings from the Adirondacks in New York all the way down to the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Georgia. This bizarre figure has haunted our imagination for decades, but scientists believe it could actually be a humble black bear in disguise. It turns out the American black bear is found in many of the same areas where people claim to have spotted Bigfoot. Studies show that for every 1,000 increase in the bear population, there was a 4% increase in Bigfoot sightings. And there are 2 main reasons why the American black bear could be the perfect imposter. The first reason, they're big. Adult males can weigh up to 660 pounds and grow up to 6 feet long. The second reason, while we think they primarily walk on 4 legs, they are perfectly capable of standing upright. In fact, not only are they capable, they do it all the time. They stand up to get a better look at something, sniff the air, or just to appear bigger when they feel threatened. When they do that, they definitely look like a human-like figure. And for those people who aren't used to being around bears, it's easy to mistake them for something more sinister and out of this world. Now you might be wondering why so many strange sights and creatures are said to live in the Appalachian, and the answer might be linked to the region's age. The process that led to the creation of these mountains has been going on for over 480 million years, which means they're older than Saturn's rings, for example. Over all this time, the region has gone through some drastic changes in its composition, creating a huge number of ecological niches with varying elevations, slopes, aspects, temperatures, and rainfall. And according to experts, the reason the region is so full of bizarre legends isn't just because the mountains are old, but because they still look old. Since a large part of Appalachia is basically untouched by humans, much of that ancient biodiversity is still around and seems unknown to us. This has created a landscape full of deep forests, mist-covered valleys, and winding rivers. A place where secrets seem to be hiding in the fog. And over the centuries, the isolation of the Appalachians only allowed these stories to grow. Welcome to the spooktacular tale of the John Lawson House in New Hamburg, just 80 miles north of New York City. This 150-year-old home is known for its creepy mannequins that used to magically change outfits and poses on the front porch. Some say these mannequins were haunted by spirits from tragic events that happened nearby in the 19th century. Back in the day, the Lawson family built this historic home in a bustling riverport village. Tragedy struck when a train accident and a destructive fire occurred near the house in the 1870s, causing chaos and taking many lives. The mysterious mannequins appeared without explanation, dressed in old-timey clothes and accessories. The homeowner was unknown when that creepy stuff was first noticed. Sometimes, mannequins would hold something in their hands, like books. Also, it seemed like those spine-chilling figures didn't fancy bad weather. They would vanish during storms and even face the sight of the lethal train accident. But suddenly, in 2016, the mannequins vanished without a trace, leaving behind a mystery that still haunts the John Lawson house to this day. Will they ever return? Only time will tell. Venice, the one in Italy, not a neighborhood in California, may be considered the city of love and all, but Poveglia Island has a fishy reputation. Made up of 2 natural islands and 1 human-made one with wooden pillars and layers of earth, this place is like a creepy puzzle waiting to be solved. One island is covered in greenery, another has the main buildings, and the smallest is basically a fort. The island is now deserted with just a few lonely structures left standing. Rumor has it that about half of the land on the island is made up of human ashes. Yikes. According to stories, when a plague hit, the hospital had to figure out what to do with all the bodies. Supposedly, they ended up burning them, but some say that over 100,000 victims were actually buried in mass graves, called plague pits. The details about how all these bodies were disposed of are sketchy at best, leaving room for spooky speculation about what went down on the island. Whether they were torched or buried, the sad truth is that thousands of lives were lost and left behind on Poveglia Island. Another creepy tale involves a crazy asylum director who supposedly jumped off the clock tower after being swallowed up by a mysterious fog. But this story may have originated from shows like Ghostbusters, with no actual proof that this dude even existed. There are also whispers of patients seeing ghosts within the psychiatric hospital, adding to the island's spooky vibe. While these stories might be a bit out there, they definitely add to the mystery surrounding Poveglia Island. Despite all the exaggerated stories and urban legends, one thing remains true. Poveglia Island has a dark history filled with tragedy. This place has seen it all. The empty buildings and abandoned landscapes are like sad reminders of the sorrowful past that haunts this eerie island. Hush, don't move. We're in the clearing at Hoia Baciu, Transylvania, which has a funky reputation for being one of the creepiest places in the world. The trees there wouldn't grow in a clearing that has a perfect oval shape. Soil scientists have been unable to explain this anomaly. The area attracts a variety of people, from Romanian witches to sword-wielding Americans attempting to cleanse the forest through yoga. Hoia Baciu gained international attention in 1968 when someone captured a photograph of a mysterious flying object hovering over the clearing. Some people are sure those must have been guests from another planet. This event, along with the alleged paranormal occurrences reported by visitors, has added to the forest's enigmatic reputation. Local guides also share other anecdotes linked to this forest. For example, some time ago, a group of 60 people from Bucharest attempted to open a gate into another dimension there. If a paranormal forest doesn't send shivers down your spine, maybe this place will. Yep, there's a whole settlement at the bottom of Lake Lanier, Georgia's biggest lake, and it's filled with a secret American horror story. Terror, ghosts, and other paranormal stuff. The whole shebang. There are many spooky tales about Lake Lanier. Fishermen have reported seeing ghostly kayaks, and stories circulate about women with no hands haunting the Jerry D. Jackson Bridge. Plus, the lake has a dark side, with over 500 demises since it was created and more than 200 since 1994. People talk about good swimmers getting snatched under the water, mysterious boating accidents, and vehicles crashing into the lake for no reason. Locals will straight up tell you, don't go to Lake Lanier. And with the lake stats, it's hard to argue. Some say the lake is cursed, but it's up to you to decide. The Poison Garden is a misleading, beautiful place where danger lurks behind every leaf. It's tucked away behind spooky black gates at the Alnwick Garden. There, you'll discover a collection of over 100 plants that are not just toxic, but downright lethal. If you don't have to worry about accidentally poisoning yourself, just keep your hands to yourself. No sniffing or nibbling allowed. Venture through ivy-covered tunnels and fiery-shaped beds as you dive into the history of poison and hear some thrilling tales of infamous cases. Prepare to meet some dangerous flora like Laburnum atropa belladonna, and even the infamous Jimpy Jimpy plant that's rumored to be able to hurt you as nothing else. By the way, there are many wild stories about this dreaded plant. Some are a bit exaggerated, like the one about using the leaves as toilet paper. Ouch. But others are no joke, like horses getting stung and going bonkers. There's even a tragic tale of a person passing away from its sting in New Guinea back in 1922. So come on, take the plunge in the Poison Garden if you dare. Just remember to steer clear of any plants that could lead to a seriously bad day. You're having your vacation in Finland, the happiest country in the world. You rent a car and drive to see the lakes. What could go wrong? Suddenly, you come face to face with over 1,000 eerily still figures. These guys are dressed to impress in colorful outfits, but there's something off about them. Their heads are featureless, their bodies wooden, and they all seem to be staring in the same direction. It's like they were playing a giant game of freeze tag, but nobody remembered to yell, "Tag, you're it." These silent sentinels are known as the Silent People, and they've been scaring people since 1988. They're the brainchild of dancer and choreographer Reijo Kila. Originally hanging out in Lasila near Helsinki, they've traveled around a bit before settling in their current spot on the side of the road. Why did they move? Maybe they were tired of big city traffic and wanted a quieter place to chill. No one really knows what these peat-headed, straw-haired guys are all about. Some folks find them creepy, like they're watching your every move. Others think they're kinda sad, like a group of friends waiting for a bus that never comes. But hey, that's art for you. Open to interpretation and open to jokes about scarecrows having better fashion sense than most humans. Bonus here, there's a cafe with traditional Finnish crepes, so you may get scared there, but not hungry. In Australia's far north, there's a spooky granite mountain known as the Bermuda Triangle. Black Mountain, also known as Kalka Jaka by the indigenous owners, has been the backdrop for some seriously strange disappearances dating back to 1800s. It's pretty close to Cooktown, so it has some legendary tales attached to it. They say Black Mountain was once a fierce battlefield for opposing ancestral clans. The whole place is littered with massive granite boulders stacked in a chaotic manner, where explorers, horses, and cattle seemingly vanished into thin air. For many years, people were scared by the bad reputation of this place until recent research shed some light on the dark mystery of Black Mountain, leaving no room for further speculation. Turns out, the reason for the disappearances may not be as supernatural as we thought. Lack of swimming skills, crocodiles, or just some good old-fashioned tomfoolery could have been the real culprits.
Why can't mermaids be real? Well, firstly, they would freeze and struggle to survive in the frigid ocean waters. Brr! You know, those skinny Disney types would turn into icicles. The truth is, the human body isn't built for prolonged aquatic adventures. I mean, come on, who wants to hang out in bone-chilling depths? Sure, there are warmer spots near the ocean surface, but if mermaids wanted to set up shop at the bottom of the deep blue, things would get frosty real quick. Water temperature drops like a pop balloon the deeper you go. So what would a cold-resistant mermaid look like? Hairy and big. Imagine a super fuzzy aquatic mammal or an extra plump mermaid rocking the underwater fashion scene. Not exactly the image we had in mind, huh? Secondly, they just can't cherry-pick body parts like in a mythical buffet. Mammals and fish play by different rules. Fish don't have the warm-blooded hairy vibes that define mammals like us. It's like trying to merge a human with a fish. Evolutionarily speaking, that's a big no-no. Our human lineage and the fish clan took different paths long ago. They're distant relatives, like that cousin you see at family reunions and awkwardly wave at from a distance. And don't even get me started on digestive dilemmas. Fish and mammals have completely different plumbing systems. When you imagine a mermaid with a mix of mammalian digestive powers and fishy hindquarters, well, things just don't add up. Let's dive deeper and separate fact from fishy fiction. If mermaids needed to swim up to the surface for a gulp of fresh air, they'd require a blowhole instead of a regular nose and mouth. You know, just like our crocodile friends with their handy nostrils. Breathing underwater ain't no easy feat, my friends. Now, if mermaids were all about that aquatic life, they'd either need gills that they curiously lack, or another clever way to supply themselves with oxygen. Marine mammals have evolved anatomies that allow them to survive those lengthy oceanic excursions. Human divers, on the other hand, have their lungs shrunk in size when they go deeper due to the pressure. Some whale species have special rib cages to protect their lungs during such moments. Plus, they've got that fancy myoglobin stuff in their muscles and blood, which loves to cozy up with oxygen. Mermaids would need something similar in their toolkits. Now, let's not forget about those gangly human arms and fingers that serve us so well on land. Hello, pizza time. Sadly, in the water realm, they're not ideal. If mermaids had been around longer in evolutionary terms, maybe their arms would have undergone some serious makeover. If mermaids had a lengthier evolutionary history, those arms would need some adjustments, that's for sure. Unless, of course, there was a good reason for their existence. Maybe their environment would require them to be food-gathering aficionados rather than speedy swimmers. So you see, the mixture of human and marine anatomy may offer the worst of both worlds. The challenges remain even if we reverse things, with human legs at the bottom and a fish head on top. Hey, want to kiss the girl? No. Gills for easy breathing? Handy indeed. Yet, what about those exposed human parts struggling to withstand the ocean's wintry charms? The Fiji Mermaid was a curiosity that gained popularity in sideshows during the 19th century. It consisted of the torso and head of a juvenile monkey sewn onto the back half of a fish. This peculiar object was presented as the mummified body of a creature believed to be half mammal and half fish, resembling a mermaid. P.T. Barnum, the renowned showman, acquired the mermaid and exhibited it in his American Museum in New York in 1842. The mermaid's appearance, described by Barnum himself, departed from traditional depictions of mermaids as attractive beings. Instead, it was described as an ugly, dried-up creature frozen in a painful-looking pose. It was another hoax promoted in those times. I know, this sort of breaks the spell. But if the water is going to get dangerously cold, then realistically, mermaids would spend some time fattening up. Basically, they would look like sea lions. It all comes down to the freezing temperatures of water at some point. This made me ask, what if the ideal place for these ladies was underground caves and Arctic waters? Well, let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, mermaids discovered a wondrous secret in the deep ocean depths, where sunlight could barely reach. In this realm of imagination and possibility, they stumbled upon a hidden underground springs and caves adorned with intricate coral formations. These enchanting locations held a secret that would forever change their underwater lives. As the mermaids ventured deeper into the mysterious subterranean world, they were mesmerized by the shimmering light refracting through the crystal-clear water. But it wasn't just the ethereal beauty that captivated them. It was the realization that these hidden springs and caves offered more than just aesthetic charm. These subterranean water systems were connected to vast underground reservoirs, providing a bountiful source of fresh water. The mermaids reveled in the tranquility of this land. The gentle sound of trickling water soothed their spirits, while the soft glow from bioluminescent organisms illuminated their path. News of the subterranean springs and caves spread among the mermaid community, and soon these sites became cherished gathering places. Mermaids would share stories and songs, their melodious voices echoing through the caverns, creating an atmosphere of joy and enchantment. There was another place where they could live happily, the icy Arctic and Antarctic regions, where frost and snow reigned supreme. In this realm of imagination, the mermaids had evolved to thrive in the extreme cold, defying the expectations of the underwater world. Their resilience and remarkable abilities allowed them to navigate frozen environments. In these frigid waters, the mermaids revealed their wondrous adaptation to the icy domain. Their iridescent scales glistened like ice crystals, shimmering with hues of blue and silver that mirrored the frozen landscapes around them. They possessed an innate ability to regulate their body temperature, enabling them to withstand the biting cold and icy currents. To navigate through the frozen terrain, the mermaids developed special features. Their tails transformed, bearing a majestic combination of sleekness and strength, resembling the magnificent flukes of the Arctic whales. With each flick, they propelled themselves effortlessly through the dense icy waters, moving with a grace that mesmerized everyone who saw them. Within this frozen wonderland, the mermaids found solace and purpose. They became the guardians of these icy realms, nurturing delicate ecosystems hidden beneath the frost-covered surface. Okay, well, maybe the story is just one version of how reality could unfold, but we do have real-life mermaids in our world. People admire these creatures so much that they create events and communities to swim together while wearing costumes. In the UK, there is a mesmerizing mermaid who is admired by a lot of people. Her name is Hannah Caddick, also known as Mermaid Torva, and her tale showcases the vibrant colors of the local sea life. The Portland Week event is organized to raise funds for an environmental group, and Hannah, who resides on a nearby houseboat, is part of the growing community of mermaids in the UK. Like other mermaids, Hannah uses a monofin, a large single flipper that propels her through the water. These monofins can be quite expensive, with silicone tails costing over £2,000 and often being meticulously handcrafted. So, would you consider getting a tail and joining this community? Or would you prefer to be a spectator and watch them from the shore? And here's a short useful fact. Nowadays, when we hear the word siren, we often think of mermaids. But let's not forget that sirens were there to blur the line between life and the beyond and to serenade everyone with an utterly irresistible song. While plenty of water-dwelling temptresses are out there, the sirens were the real deal. They lured sailors. But mermaids aren't the same as them. Mermaids are enchanting and nice creatures. And these days, sirens are what you hear when fire trucks, ambulances, and police cars drive by on their way to help someone.
On September 16th of 2023, without warning, the Earth began to hum. A low, strange vibration reverberated through the crust. This set off seismic alarms all across the globe. For 9 days straight, the planet was pulsing with this horrifying rhythm, and scientists had no idea what was going on. Meanwhile, the total disaster was happening in Greenland. It wasn't an earthquake. They knew that much. They could tell it by the rhythm. Since we all live on giant tectonic plates, they constantly move and slide on magma like icebergs on water. Sometimes, as they move, they can rub against each other or collide or break. In any case, all this causes an incredible release of energy that sends shockwaves through the ground. That's when we feel the ground literally shaking, and it's what we call an earthquake. These vibrations we feel are called seismic waves. Seismometers pick them up as pings or rumbles. In a typical earthquake, they create a bunch of different frequencies. It's a crazy chaotic mix of low and high frequencies, like smashing every piano key. What was weird about the Greenland event is that the signals weren't like that at all. It was a steady, single-frequency vibration, as if some ancient machine was stirring beneath the earth. It's like one piano key being struck over and over, creating a doom-like, repetitive sound. Turns out, what they were hearing wasn't the noise of tectonic plates going wild. It was a phenomenon seismologists had never seen before. The days passed, and the mysterious noise just kept going. The vibrations repeated every 90 seconds, echoing around the world. The hunt for answers was growing more desperate. Seismologists had no idea what they were dealing with. They had to gather a huge international team of 68 people from 15 countries. All these scientists were gathering seismic data, satellite images, and doing some advanced math for several days, until they finally realized who the culprit was. Water. It all happened in a remote, desolate region of East Greenland. This place is full of fjords, narrow inlets of the sea between high cliffs, kinda like deep water-filled valleys surrounded by towering rocky sides. In this area, surrounded by jagged peaks and icy waters, the air was still. The landscape seemingly frozen in time. Nothing here changed much for years. Until one day, a colossal landslide has unfolded in the Dixon Fjord. One of those steep mountainsides towering over the fjord at almost 4,000 feet high collapsed in a massive landslide. Picture a huge chunk of this mountain crumbling and crashing down into the fjord below. This sent a deluge of rock and ice crashing into the water. The impact was just apocalyptic, 882 million cubic feet of debris. That's enough ice and rock to fill 10,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools, or 10 Great Pyramids of Giza. And all this nightmare hurled into the water with such force that it kick-started a tsunami about 360 feet high, taller than the Statue of Liberty, into the air. What's crazy is that this incredibly powerful wave was trapped in the fjord by narrow cliffs, unable to escape. It's like water sloshing in a closed bathtub. For 9 days, the mega tsunami continued to churn through it. That's why we heard this endless hum. It was a rhythmic back and forth of the water slamming against the walls. The shockwaves were rippling deep into Earth's crust, vibrations so strong that they were picked up by seismometers around the globe. This was a phenomenon so rare, so unprecedented, that it left scientists stunned. It turned out to be a perfect storm of elements. A glacier, weakened by years of warming, could no longer bear the weight of the mountain above. This collapse was inevitable, and the chaos literally shook the Earth to its core. And people often hang out in this area with cruise ships passing by. We're lucky that no lives were lost in the disaster. It was a close call though. A tourist ship stranded in the area just 2 days before narrowly escaped the tsunami's reach by pure luck. But it doesn't mean there were no losses. The waves destroyed a nearby Inuit site, which was there untouched for over 200 years. They also swept away the huts at a research station that were about 43 miles away. The vibrations traveled from Greenland to the South Pole in less than an hour. That just shows how dangerous events like this can be. And this isn't the only place where such catastrophes are happening. In the beautiful California community of Rancho Palos Verdes, the ground is shifting so quickly that it's tearing homes apart. The land there has always been kinda unstable. It has some unique geology. It's built on soft, clay-rich soil and sits on a geological fault line, which makes it prone to landslides. This means that this land is prone to slow natural shifting over many years, even when no crazy weather is happening. It's been like this for decades, but usually it's slow and pretty manageable, like about a foot a year. Imagine a tree that you played with as a kid moving 20 feet to the left as you grow up. For decades, residents adapted. They built their homes on adjustable beams. This helped the houses to move with the land, and that strategy worked well until now. Recently, things have been getting much worse in the community. Now, the land is moving by a foot in a single week. That would be like if the same tree moved almost 960 feet since you were a child. The past 2 years have also caused some heavy rains, and the weather has been getting worse. This increased water content in the soil. The land became heavier and more prone to rapid movement. Now, this once idyllic seaside escape turned into a disaster zone. Cracks have appeared in closets, gardens, and roads, growing larger with each passing day. Streets that were once smooth are now buckled and twisted, with roads turning into a crazy theme park. Houses that once stood firm are being ripped from their foundations, some of them split in half. One of the houses had its front door 8 feet off the ground. Entire neighborhoods have been plunged into chaos. Utility companies had to switch off gas and electricity indefinitely to prevent potential disasters. The hardest hit is the coastal neighborhood of Portuguese Bend, where residents are living on the edge, literally. It always had amazing ocean views and cool sea breezes, with horses and peacocks still wandering the tree-lined streets. But now, it's like an earthquake hit. Only this time, the earth isn't stopping. For many, this place feels like paradise, if only the land would stop shifting beneath their feet. So the locals don't give up. Some of them had to leave, but many are determined to stay and fight, despite the destruction. But they still have to pour in hundreds of thousands of dollars to save their properties. People have installed generators to keep the lights on and set up sewer systems and pumps to drain the groundwater causing the landslides. Some say that the only way for these neighborhoods to survive might be to go completely off-grid, installing power walls to store energy and stuff like that. People are trying their best to run the sewer system off generators. They hope that they could get rid of this water in the soil that's causing these hellish landslides in the first place. They're determined to fight, but they will need help and support from the government to fight this disaster. Landslides are actually more common across the US than many might think. And new maps and data show that tons of people in the country might be in danger. Scientists managed to create the first very detailed, very cool map that shows where these landslides might happen, county by county. It's based on a lot of data and the history of 1 million previous landslides. They say that nearly 40% of the United States is at risk of experiencing landslide activity, which could lead to some insane catastrophes in certain areas. Luckily, now both residents and engineers can keep this in mind. But all this shows how vulnerable we are to natural disasters, and how we should always stay alerted.